Welcome to this episode of The Good, The Bad and The Odd One Out. Your host Mark. I'll be going through Star Trek Season 3, Episodes 11 to 20. So we're getting near the end now. There's only 4 more left after this lot, so let's get into this. Number 11 is called Wink of an Eye. Now, I had an interesting concept involving aliens living at different rates of time than everyone else, i.e. super fast. But the plot really had more holes than Swiss cheese. You can kind of be aware they're there by a weird buzzing sound, almost like an insect, but you can't see them. But often they'll stand still for quite a while, so you should be able to see them, but you can't. That's one of the major sort of logic holes. There's others, but with things like this, you can kind of look over logic holes if it's halfway decent. But this was a really plodding, mundane sort of episode. One thing I did notice about it is they're trying to stylistically stick to something. Whenever they were in fast time, if you want to call it that, there was a lot of use of Dutch angles, slightly sideways cameras, to give you a sort of subconscious feel for an odd dimension, if you were. So there was a lot of that, but apart from that, there wasn't really much else to this episode. It was pretty forgettable, wasn't enjoyable at all. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Anyway, the next episode was called The Empath, so episode 12, The Empath. This is one of the few original series episodes I would consider outright terrible. I didn't loathe it, but it bored me. It was dull. The really small budget that they were sort of constrained in this series by, it was really shows in this one. There were bare sets, poor effects. There was lots of music to try and convey emotional engagement instead of it being in the writing and the acting. It was a really threadbare plot, and there was lots of moments of no speaking and sort of meaningful looks that were meant to be meaningful, but they weren't. They were just dull. But this one was apparently banned for some time by the BBC because of elements of sadism, and the only sadism I could think really was showing it to people. It's a bit sadistic, but not a good episode. Rate it very low. It's the second worst episode I've seen so far, and considering I'm nearly at the end, that probably means it is the second worst episode ever, as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't recommend even watching this one. Okay, the third episode in this was Elan of Troyes. Episode 13. Here we get this alien princess who's Kirk's kind of involved in. It was a bit all over the place there, and yeah, the princess isn't bad. She's fairly haughty. She's played by I think she's a Vietnamese actress. She certainly sort of looks and acts the part, very stern. It's a bit of the Taming of the Shrew in this, but in the end, her and Kirk kind of get together. There's a lot of, and he kowtows to her at the first part of the episode, which seems odd for him. There's lots of slapping and threats of spanking and all sorts of things. She, like I say, she was alright as the haughty princess, but when she tried to sort of bring out other emotions like, tenderness, it just didn't work. She was alright as haughty though. There was also a big space battle at the end, which I didn't quite understand, but they seemed to be going to Warp 2 to fight Klingons. Now, fighting at Warp is a very recent development in Star Trek sort of history, but they were doing it in this one. It did make sense in the terms of that context, but yeah, it was alright. It was a mess of an episode, really, and not as much fun as it could have been. Okay, episode 14 was Whom Gods Destroy. This was another poor episode with far too much dialogue and a few bits that were really quite bad acting from Shatner. Really, really quite bad. And there's a distinct lack of budget. The money was just spread too thin on this one. There was one bright spot. Yvonne Craig, who plays Batgirl in the 60s Batman series, was in this. She was painted green and wearing a one piece. I don't know if she was, one of them green slave girls, but she was painted green. She was wearing a really quite good. It looked good in a one piece costume. She doesn't get much anything to act with. The dialogue's pretty poor, but she's not a great actress, but she has a lot of presence in it, and it worked quite well in this. She did as best as she could given the poor script and so on. Nimoy was pretty good. One thing I did like about this episode is we had Scotty running the bridge, and I bet you, I always have the feeling that if Scotty was a captain, he'd be the biggest badass in the fleet. He doesn't take any prisoners and he don't mess about. But there's not much more to say about it. It was kind of interesting to see Kurt meeting one of his heroes, schoolboy heroes, and that not working out. But there really wasn't that much to this. Episode 15 was Let This Be Your Last Battlefield. Now, I did like this one. This is a kind of pickup compared to the first four. It had Frank Gorshin in it, and it's the episode where there's a guy that's black down one side and white down another, chasing another guy who's white down one side and black down the other. It's that one. But I've always liked Frank Gorshin. I think he's got a real presence. I really liked him in the 60s Batman series as the Riddler. I thought, in my opinion, he was like one of the best villains in there. My favourite villains were really in that series, the Riddler and Catwoman. I never really liked the Penguin or the Joker that much in it. They were okay. Though I know that the Penguin at least got a lot of fans. And the sort of message, it was extremely laboured. It was about race and stuff like that. But it's kind of cool they sidestep controversy by making it really obviously not about someone being white and someone being black, but you using this black and white reversed colour as the metaphor for race. There's also some kind of interesting stuff. They talk about the sort of racial issues in the history of Vulcan, to avoid talking about those in Earth, of course, but it was kind of interesting. I found this one entertaining. I like this one. That brings us to episode 16, Mark of Gideon. Now, this was all over the place story-wise. The script didn't feel properly formed, and it wasn't that coherent. There was bits where Spock and more the crew actually get offended by the head of the guy on Gideon. And it didn't seem that obvious why they get offended. He was just being a bit obtuse, really. It was a bit offhand, but it wasn't as out there as their reactions kind of suggested. So it didn't quite gel for me. And I couldn't understand the point of why they wanted the illness, to be honest. And the whole setting up of the fake Enterprise to confuse Kurt was weird. I know it was to do with budget, but it was it just didn't really work again. But I think the idea of a world where whatever they do, the organs just regenerate themselves and you can't die, i.e. they tried sterilising themselves, but their organs regenerate, so it didn't work, and the world was slowly filling up. But it was silly that they didn't appear to have considered contraception, for example. And it's kind of typical of these season 3 episodes that aren't good. It was slow, half-baked, lacking coherency or a sense of finish and care. And this was a typical one in that group. Which brings us to number 17 here, That Which Survives. Yeah, I like this better than a lot of the others so far. Again, suffers from lack of polish, and there's some silly jokes and dialogue at the expense of Spock. It makes him come across as pompous. That was another sort of issue with many of these episode 3 ones. They'd use Spock as an easy scapegoat for some cheap laughs, which always was a bit annoying. However, I did like the vibe of the episode. And Lee Meriwether was in this, who played Catwoman, was one of the three Catwomen in the 60s Batman series. And she was quite beautiful and fairly elegant, apart from some very weird eye makeup. She should have been a movie star, really. I don't know how she wasn't, but also, there was some weird stuff in this. There were 3 or more even crew that had quite distinct speaking parts that I'd never seen. It's crew I'd never been aware of or seen. But they were kind of seemed to have significant characters in this. It was, again, I think, it almost like they had a writer who didn't really understand Star Trek that well and just introduced these characters as speaking parts. Also, we had no Chekhov. I don't know why there was no Chekhov in this one, whereas they had crewmen doing his bits and talking, but why didn't they have Chekhov? It was a bit weird. It was interesting that they recorded on a previous episode, which was The Devil in the Dark, which I don't think I've ever seen before in any other episodes, other than I remember them talking about the Corbomite manoeuvre in one other episode from where the Corbomite manoeuvre happened. So that was kind of cool. The whole episode didn't really make much sense, but it was fine. Episode 18 comes next. That was The Lights of Zuta. This was a boring one. Co-written apparently by Shari Lewis, who was the woman who used to be on with a sheep, a ragdoll sheep called Lamb Chop. I think she was a ventriloquist. I can't remember. It was a long time ago since I saw it. And in this one, Scotty's got a love interest, which is kind of cool, and it was fairly well competently put together. Some of the effects were a bit odd, and the love interest, she was quite good in this, but otherwise the episode was kind of bland and boring. Okay, so that brings us to number 19, which is Requiem for Methuselah. Now this, I think, was one of the best ones of this particular set. I mean, I mentioned that I like Let That Be Your Last Battle, but the other one I really liked was Requiem for Methuselah. The central premise of an immortal living through the centuries and watching those who he loved die, and trying to overcome this burden is a pretty terrific one. It's been done since in Highlander, say, but this was kind of interesting at the time, I think. The acting was pretty decent, except for Shatner here and there, and the pace and balance were good. Kirk falling in love near the end seemed unnecessary, and the final moments were also sort of kind of abrupt, and didn't really need to happen. He just didn't need to fall in love really in this 7, and they wrote it in, but had a bit of drama, I guess, but it kind of felt inconsistent with the rest of the story. But I liked it. I actually liked it enough I looked up more about the story. The story was originally written by Jerome Bixby, a sort of famous writer, sci-fi writer, and I think a TV writer, and certainly short stories. And he's reworked the idea for a movie called The Man from Earth, which came out not that long ago, I don't think, maybe 10 years or something like that. But I want to see it because I'm interested in how he pursued this. I think the idea might have been this immortal might have either been Jesus or influenced Jesus or met Jesus. But this film, Man from Earth, is now on my rental queue. I'm kind of keen to see it. But yeah, it was an interesting premise. Liked this one a lot. And then the last one of this season was The Way to Eden. Yeah, space hippies. We get Charles Napier here, who's like often a tough guy. For example, he was the head of the Good Old Boys in the Blues Brothers, pretty aggressive kind of chap. And he's wearing a really bad blonde curly wig. He's wearing a thigh-length boots, I think they're suede, singing songs which are kind of semi-hippie-ish. Yeah, you have to hear him to. In fact, I'll play one out. There was a cute Russian hippie woman who kind of had a history with Chekhov. That was kind of, and at one point we have Spock rocking out with the hippies, which is kind of funny. It is often rated as one of the worst episodes ever made, along with Spock's Brain. But I enjoyed it. It was pretty good, and I'm kind of enjoy Spock's Brain too. And it was just for the sheer bizarre entertainment value, and it's probably the most reactionary original series episode ever that like Scotty going about. I don't understand why young people don't have better disciplined minds and all this. It was kind of fun. We'll play out one of them songs, but yeah, that's my view of those 10 episodes. So the next one we do of this will be the last 4 episodes, and then I might do a recap of what I thought was the best and worst of the whole lot across the series. That's going to go. Okay, I hope you enjoy this song. Bye from me.
I'm talking about you. I'm talking about me. Long time back when the galaxy was new, man found out what he had to do. Found he had to eat and he found he had to drink, and a long time later he found he had to think. Yes, think. I'm standing here wondering.
What?
If a man tells another man, out of my way, he piles up trouble for himself all day. But all kinds of trouble come to an end when a man tells another man, be my friend. My friend. Well, what's it going to be?
There's a mile-wide emptiness between you and me.
Can't reach across it, hardly even see.
Someone ought to take a step one way or other.
Let's say goodbye, or let's say brother. Get together and have some fun. I don't know how to do it, but it's got to be done.